Okay, we're going to start today's lesson on choosing representatives. And you remember we were talking about the Founding Fathers had used the Articles of Confederation for the last 10 years, and now they realize that it's not very good and they need to come up with a better plan. One of the plans they came up with was the Virginia plan. Okay, now right now we have one branch of government, which is legislative. Each state gets one vote. Congress is able to make laws, but it cannot enforce them, and Congress is unable to directly tax citizens. And just like we talked about in class, it means that the federal government is very weak and the states have all the power. And since you have 13 different states and none of them can agree on anything, nothing is going to get done. So some smart people came up with a proposal and they called it the Virginia plan. And the Virginia plan has three branches of government. You have legislative, judicial, and executive. Legislative branch, Congress has the power to make laws, including laws taxing citizens. You have the upper house and you have the lower house. The lower house is elected by the people, and the upper house is elected by the lower house. States with larger populations get more representation. In the judicial side, judges have the power to interpret laws, and just like we talked about the last time we were together, that means they read the Constitution and they find out whether a law fits the Constitution or not. And then you have the executive branch. The president has the power to enforce laws. The president is chosen by the legislative branch, and presidents serve for a term, and if I remember correctly, we decided 81 years, which is what I thought is crazy, but we're going to go with that because, that's what we chose. Okay, if you guys remember, we chose identities and we had them taped to our desks. Well, obviously we can't do that anymore, so I took all of your identities and I put them on these two slides. Now, this first slide shows all the states that support the representatives being appointed, okay? So if you're one of these 9 states, you support representatives to be appointed. On this next slide, these 8 states support representatives to be elected, okay? So if you're one of these 8, then you support representatives being elected to their positions, okay? Now this slide shows how should representatives be chosen. Now this is basically, you have the two groups, people that think they should be elected and people that think that they should be appointed. And if you look on here, on the left-hand side, it's elected by the people. On the right-hand side, it's appointed by the state legislatures. What you need to do is you need to read through these things and see what the arguments are for elected and what the arguments for state legislatures to be appointed. Because later on, you're going to be asked to vote. And when you vote, you're also going to be asked to argue for or against whatever your position is. So you need to look at this and make sure you know what it says. Now, I know some of you guys have a little bit of trouble reading and understanding, and I understand that too. So what I have done at the end of this presentation, this same page will come up again, and I will have read the entire thing out loud to you so you can follow along, okay? There is also another slide after that that's called electing representatives, and it kind of gives you the story behind everything. I will also read that entire thing to you also so you can follow along, because I want you to really understand how this works so when you vote the right way, okay? Everybody following me? All right. Okay, if you look at this sheet right here, it says, how should representatives be chosen? There is one of these attached to this lesson in Google Docs. So what I want you to do is, I want you to take the other slide that you looked at before this one that shows you the arguments for each way of voting, and then I want you to describe your opinion on line 1. On line 2 it says explain an argument that supports your opinion. So I want you to explain what supports your opinion, and you can get all of this off of that other slide. And then the third one is refute an argument from the opposing point of view. And what that means is you're going to read what the opposing point of view is, and you're going to argue against one of those opinions, okay? Then the next part, it says proposals. And each state will have the same number of representatives, vote 1, vote 2. The first vote is going to be, you're going to vote yes or no on each one of these, A, B, C, and D, based on your identity card, okay? So each state will have the same number of representatives. You're going to vote yes or no. B, the number of representatives for each state will be based on population, yes or no? C, in the lower house, the number of representatives will be based on state population. In the upper house, each state will have the same number of representatives, yes or no? And then the last one is D. In the lower house, each state will have the same number of representatives. In the upper house, the number of representatives will be based on state population. Now, remember, vote 1 is based on your identity card. Now, on the next one where it says vote 2, you're going to vote again on all 4 of these proposals, but they're going to be based on your personal opinion, what you think right now, okay? And the last one, it says explain how you feel about the results of the voting. After I get all of your answers back, I will tally everything up, and then in a on Google Classroom, I will let you guys know what all came out, and then you guys will give me number 4, explain how you feel about the results of the voting, okay? Okay, as promised, I am going to read How Should Representatives Be Chosen in its entirety. And I don't want you to just listen to me. I want you to try to follow along and read along, okay? Here we go. The Constitutional Convention has decided to create a 2-house legislature which will have the power to make laws. Representatives from each state will make up the legislature. How will the representatives be chosen? Should representatives be directly elected by the people through a popular vote, or should representatives be chosen by state legislatures? Here are the arguments. Elected by the people. In order for the legislature to represent the people, lawmakers must be elected by the people. Elected representatives understand what life is like for those they represent and will act in their best interest. If representatives are chosen by state legislatures, they will feel more loyalty to the states than to the people. State legislatures are likely to choose wealthy social elites who will be out of touch with the struggles of everyday people. George Mason, a Virginia delegate, says, "The legislature ought to know and sympathize with every part of the community. We ought to attend to the rights of every class of people." James Madison, a Virginia delegate, says, "The popular election of one branch of the national legislature is essential to every plan of free government." Appointed by the state legislatures. Representatives should represent the interests of the states rather than the people. They should act as state ambassadors to the federal government. Elected representatives must focus on public opinion in order to be re-elected. State-appointed representatives are free to focus on their work. The common people do not have the time or education to understand politics. They may elect unworthy representatives. State governments will choose the nation's best and brightest citizens to be representatives. Elbridge Gerry, Massachusetts delegate, "The evils we experience flow from the excess of democracy. They are daily measled into the most baneful measures and opinions by the false reports circulated by designing men." Roger Sherman, Connecticut delegate, says, "People should have as little to do as may be about government. They want information and are constantly liable to be measled." Our final slide is called Electing Representatives. By 1787, it was clear to many Americans that the Articles of Confederation desperately needed revisions. In May 1787, delegates from all the states, except Rhode Island, met for this purpose in Philadelphia. They called the meeting the Constitutional Convention. The delegates agreed to keep the discussions and votes secret until the convention was over. James Madison felt that the country's constitution needed more than simple tweaks. It needed a complete overhaul. He came up with a plan for a stronger federal government which included a legislative, judicial, and executive branch. His plan, called the Virginia Plan, was presented to the convention on May 29, 1787. The plan included a bicameral or two-body legislature with an upper and a lower house. Representatives in the lower house would be elected by the people. Representatives in the upper house would be elected by members of the lower house. Some delegates strongly opposed the idea of a democratic election in the lower house. For instance, Roger Sherman of Connecticut felt that the common people were often measled and should have little to do with government. Others, like George Mason of Virginia, believed that representatives should be elected by the people so that they would act in the people's best interests. The issue of how to elect members of the legislature was debated for half the summer. Eventually, the delegates from Connecticut proposed a compromise called the Connecticut Plan. The members of the lower chamber of Congress, called the House of Representatives, would be directly elected by the people. Members of the upper chamber of Congress, called the Senate, would be appointed by state legislatures. The delegates also decided on term limits. Representatives would serve 2-year terms, while senators would serve 6-year terms. Members of Congress followed these guidelines for more than 100 years. Then, in 1912, the 17th Amendment established the election of the United States senators by the people instead of the state legislatures. Today, all members of the United States Congress are elected by the people. Okay, that's the end. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Do the best you can. If you have any questions, give me an email. I left you all the information on my Google Classroom announcement, and we'll talk to you here in another day or two. Bye-bye.